Hello and welcome. For those of you deep in your UPSC prep, staying ahead means looking at the bigger picture. And, well, increasingly, that picture stretches way beyond Earth.
It really does. Space is fast becoming absolutely critical in current affairs. It's got implications for both mains and prelims that you just can't ignore.
Exactly. We're seeing this fundamental shift, aren't we? How major powers view space. It's not just exploration anymore.
No, not at all. It's rapidly evolving into a potential, well, a strategic battleground, frankly. And this deep dive, our mission today, is really to unpack that transformation.
And crucially, we want to look at India's role in all of this. We're basing our discussion today on a really insightful piece from the Indian Express.
That's right. It lays out India's growing capabilities, but also this global trend towards, the militarization of space.
And CDS General Anil Chauhan recently stressed just how vital space dominance is for modern warfare. That really underscores the urgency, doesn't it?
Absolutely. It brings it home.
So our goal today is pretty straightforward. Pull out the key insights about space as this new frontier, this new potential domain of conflict, and figure out where India fits in. We're sticking closely to this Indian Express analysis to give you that clear, relevant picture for your UPSC journey.
Sounds good. Let's dive in.
Okay, first things first. How did we get here? How did space go from, the final frontier of exploration to potentially the next frontier of warfare?
Well, it's been a gradual but definite evolution. For decades, space was mostly about science, discovery, pushing boundaries. But now, the major global players, they increasingly see its undeniable strategic military value.
So it's moved beyond just science.
Oh, absolutely. We're seeing active development now, not just defensive capabilities to protect assets already up there, but offensive ones too, projecting power in space.
Right. So the ability to operate there, both offensively and defensively, is becoming as critical as, say, on land or sea or in the air.
Precisely. It's becoming a core military domain. And you see this reflected in concrete actions.
Like establishing dedicated space forces.
Exactly. The U.S. Space Force is the obvious example. And look at their budget allocations, it's really telling. We're talking billions, huge sums, specifically for R&D in space-based military tech.
Billions.
The Indian Express article mentions around $19.2 billion. And over 60% of that is just for R&D, testing, evaluation. For a UPSC aspirant, understanding that level of investment, well, it shows you the priorities, doesn't it?
Wow, that scale really hits home. And it's not just the U.S., is it?
Not at all. China's PLA Strategic Support Force is another key example. They've explicitly integrated space operations right into their military doctrine.
So it's not an afterthought for them.
Far from it. It suggests they see space superiority as potentially decisive in any future conflict. It's baked into their strategy.
Okay, so it's gone beyond just having satellites for communication or observation. Now nations are actively thinking about how to deny others access or how to use their own space assets to boost their military power on Earth.
Exactly. And that naturally brings us to the rather worrying topic of space weaponization.
Right, let's talk about that. What does weaponization actually look like in space?
A key aspect is developing and testing anti-satellite weapons, or ASATs. The idea is simple but devastating. Take out an enemy's satellites.
Which could cripple them.
Absolutely. Imagine losing navigation, communication, surveillance, all in one go during a conflict. It adds this whole new layer of vulnerability that strategists are really grappling with.
And we've seen these ASAT capabilities demonstrated, haven't we? India's own Mission Shakti test in 2019 comes to mind.
Yes, Mission Shakti was a clear demonstration of that specific capability. It made a statement, but importantly, it also created space debris, something we definitely need to talk more about.
Okay, but India wasn't the only one.
No. Russia conducted an ASAT test in 2021. That one was particularly concerning because it created over 1,500 trackable pieces of debris, just like that.
1,500 pieces from
Wow.
one test.
Trackable pieces, yes. It significantly increased the hazard level for all satellites in low Earth orbit (LEO). For UPSC aspirants, understanding the dual impact demonstrating capability versus creating long-term risks is really crucial.
That's a staggering amount of debris. It really highlights the potential for unintended consequences. And the threats aren't just physical projectiles, right? The article mentioned cyber warfare, too.
That's a hugely important point. Space systems, the ground stations, the communication links, the satellites themselves, they're all potentially vulnerable to cyber attacks.
And the impact could be
devastating. You could disable early warning systems, manipulate critical data, and the tricky thing with cyber attacks is they can be relatively low cost and sometimes deniable. It makes them a tempting tool for hostile actions in space.
The KASA hack during the Russia-Ukraine war in 2022, that seems like a prime example. It disrupted satellite services for lots of users.
Exactly. That event really showed the real-world, tangible impact of cyber warfare reaching into space. It affected everything from basic internet to potentially critical infrastructure. For UPSC students, that connection between space and terrestrial systems and the potential for disruption is a key takeaway.
Definitely highlights the interconnectedness. Okay, let's shift gears slightly. The article also talked about dual-use satellites. What exactly are those?
Right, dual use. It adds another layer of complexity here. Basically, these are satellites designed from the outset to serve both civilian and military purposes.
How does that work?
Well, think about Earth observation satellites. They're great for environmental monitoring, disaster response, clearly civilian uses, but the high-resolution images they take, that's also incredibly useful for military intelligence, target identification during wartime.
So the line gets blurry.
Very blurry. It makes it really hard to categorize satellites neatly as just civilian or military, and that complicates things from a security and regulatory standpoint.
So the satellite launched for, say, mapping could also be feeding military intelligence.
Precisely. The Indian Express article uses China's Yaogan series as an example. Officially, they're remote sensing satellites. But the consensus is they have significant military surveillance capabilities.
Which makes threat assessment much harder.
Exactly. It complicates how you figure out intentions and capabilities, and then you throw in the growing role of the private sector.
Ah, yes. Companies like SpaceX, Planet Labs. How do they fit into this military picture?
They're becoming increasingly important players. They provide services like real-time intelligence, satellite imagery, and crucial internet connectivity, sometimes directly in conflict zones.
Like Starlink in Ukraine. That seems like the most prominent recent example.
Absolutely. Starlink gave Ukrainian forces vital communication links when their ground infrastructure was being hit. And Planet Labs provided commercial satellite imagery used to track troop movements.
So private companies are now integral parts of modern warfare, in a way.
Increasingly, yes. It changes the dynamics. It involves non-state actors in strategic domains in a way we haven't really seen before. For UPSC aspirants, tracking this nexus between private space tech and military ops is key to understanding modern geopolitics.
And it's not just direct military support. The disruption to those Enercon wind turbines in 2022 linked to a satellite comms issue that showed vulnerability too, right?
Exactly. It showed how even civilian infrastructure is deeply reliant on space systems and therefore potentially vulnerable during conflict. It highlights the interconnectedness and potential for cascade effects.
Okay, so we have state actors developing weapons, cyber threats, dual-use ambiguity, private sector involvement. It's a complex picture. Now let's talk about something you mentioned earlier, space debris. How does that fit into the military context?
Well, apart from the accidental debris from collisions or tests, you could theoretically, intentionally create debris.
As a weapon.
As a way to deny access. Imagine creating a dense cloud of debris in a critical orbit. It could effectively make that orbit unusable for anyone's satellites, maybe for a long time. It's a kind of coercive action without a direct kinetic hit.
That sounds incredibly dangerous and potentially uncontrollable.
Yeah.
Is that related to the Kessler syndrome idea?
Exactly. The Kessler syndrome is that nightmare scenario. A collision creates debris, that debris causes more collisions, creating even more debris. It's a runaway chain reaction.
Which could essentially lock us out of certain orbits.
Potentially, yes, rendering useful parts of space unusable for decades, maybe longer. It's a massive threat to the future of all space activities.
Terrifying. What's the scale of the problem now? How much junk is up there?
The numbers are pretty stark. The European Space Agency, ESA, estimated in 2024 around 36,500 pieces larger than 10 centimeters. And even tiny pieces, traveling at orbital speeds, can cause catastrophic damage.
And ASAT tests contribute significantly.
Hugely. China's 2007 ASAT test alone created something like 3,000 trackable pieces. Many are still up there. It shows the long-term fallout from just one event. For UPSC aspirants, grasping the scale and the long-term consequences of debris is vital.
So it's a growing, self-perpetuating problem, made worse by weaponization. Given all these dangers, ASAT, cyber threats, debris, what's the international legal situation? Is there a framework to manage this?
Well, there is a foundation, but it's limited. The cornerstone is the 1967 Outer Space Treaty. But beyond that, there's no single comprehensive treaty specifically regulating military behavior in space.
And the 1967 treaty, what are its main limitations in this context?
It does crucial things like banning nuclear weapons and WMDs in orbit, and establishing space for peaceful use by all. But, and this is a big but, it doesn't ban conventional weapons in space.
So ASATs, jammers, things like that aren't explicitly prohibited.
Exactly. That's a major loophole, allowing for the development of all sorts of counter space capabilities that aren't WMDs. Understanding that distinction is key for UPSC aspirants analyzing the legal and ethical side of this.
That seems like a pretty significant gap given where things are heading. Has there been any progress closing that gap?
There are efforts. Discussions happen, like in the UN's open-ended working group, the OEWG, on space threats. But getting global agreement, that's tough.
Why that?
Geopolitics, mainly. Different countries have different security interests, different ideas about what constitutes a threat in space and how it should be governed. Reaching consensus is proving very challenging. Following those UN discussions is important for UPSC prep, though.
Okay, so we have growing militarization, increasing risks, and a patchy regulatory environment. In that context, what are the main issues specifically for India?
India faces several really critical challenges. First off, there's the issue of strategic vulnerability, a potential deterrence gap. As rivals, particularly China, push ahead rapidly with their own space militarization and sophisticated counter-space weapons, India's own reliance on space assets for communication, surveillance, even military targeting makes it more exposed.
The article compared ASAT capabilities, didn't it?
It did. It mentioned assessments suggesting China might have multiple types of direct ascent ASATs, while India, after Mission Shakti, has demonstrated one system. That asymmetry could weaken deterrence, especially in conflicts spanning multiple domains: land, sea, air, and space.
And China integrating space into its core doctrine adds to that challenge.
Absolutely. It potentially gives them an edge in joint warfare. Understanding these comparative capabilities and doctrines is crucial for analyzing India's strategic position for the exams.
That asymmetry is definitely a concern. What else should India be worried about?
The risk of a wider space arms race and the escalation dynamics that come with it.
Also,
As more countries develop offensive space tech, others feel pressure to follow suit. It creates this dangerous cycle, increases the risk of miscalculation, makes space less stable. India might have to divert significant resources just to keep pace.
resources that could be used elsewhere.
Exactly. Potentially straining conventional or nuclear deterrence efforts. And things like China testing hypersonic glide vehicles which use space trajectories, they blur the lines between missile threats and space threats, complicating things even further. Analyzing these escalation risks is key for UPSC.
A dangerous and costly cycle indeed. What about the economic angle? India has big space ambitions, right?
Huge ambitions and huge potential. The commercial space economy is booming, projected at $13 billion by 2025. That's incredible growth, like 235% in just 2 years mentioned in the article.
But weaponization threatens that.
It definitely could. Think about higher insurance costs for satellites, international partners getting nervous about collaboration due to security risks, the threat of debris events. Yeah. It could seriously jeopardize this growth. And any disruption to space services hits countless terrestrial sectors, too. Understanding these economic risks is vital for UPSC aspirants looking at development.
So it could stifle a really promising strategic sector. And then there's the direct threat from debris to India's own satellites.
Absolutely. India has, over 29 operational satellites in LEO as of early 2024. That's a significant investment. They're vulnerable to debris, intentional or not.
And the risk is real.
Very real. ISRO performed 23 collision avoidance maneuvers in 2023 alone. 23. That tells you how crowded and dangerous it's becoming. More debris could even block future access to vital orbits. Understanding India's assets and their vulnerability is key.
23 near misses.
Wow.
Okay, finally, the article mentioned a technological lag for India in some areas.
Yes. Compared to some other major space powers, India is seen as lagging in certain advanced counterspace systems. Things like space-based lasers, jam-resistant communications, AI-powered space situational awareness, or SSA.
And that matters because
It could impact India's ability to deter threats and protect its own assets effectively. The article also pointed to budget differences. ISR's budget is significantly smaller than NASA's or China's CNSA. That affects R&D pace. Plus, relying on foreign parts can create cyber vulnerabilities. Analyzing these tech gaps in strategic autonomy is vital for UPSC.
right, it paints a really complex, sometimes worrying picture for India.
Yeah.
Now, the article did briefly touch on the main international space treaties. Could you just quickly run through those for our listeners?
Yeah.
Good revision for the exams.
Sure. So the big one is the 1967 Outer Space Treaty, peaceful exploration, no WMDs in orbit. Then the 1968 Rescue Agreement, bringing astronauts and objects back. The 1972 Liability Convention, who pays if a space object causes damage. There's the 1984 Moon Agreement, which isn't widely ratified, but it calls the moon common heritage. Then there's UN COPIUS, the UN Committee on Peaceful Uses of Outer Space. That's the main forum for cooperation. And more recently, the 2020 Artemis Accords, a US-led framework mainly for lunar exploration.
Got it. So a mix of broad principles and some specifics, but as we said, big gaps remain, especially on the military side. Given all of this, what practical steps could India actually take? What did the article suggest?
It laid out several key measures. First, establishing a dedicated space command within the integrated defense structure.
What would that achieve?
Centralization, basically. Bring space military capabilities under one roof, improve coordination between Army, Navy, Air Force, and allow for quicker deployment of space assets if needed. It would also clearly separate military space roles from ISRO scientific missions. Understanding that structure is important for UPSC aspirants looking at defense organization.
Makes sense. A unified command. What else?
Boosting indigenous counterspace tech is crucial. Investing strategically in things like co-orbital ASATs, electronic warfare for space, maybe directed energy weapons, jamming tech. The focus should be on homegrown, possibly modular, and cost-effective systems.
So building our own capabilities.
Yes, and fostering collaboration between DRDO, private startups, universities to accelerate that. For UPSC aspirants interested in defense production, this is a critical area for Make in India.
Okay, build our own tech. What about just knowing what's going on up there?
Exactly. Enhancing space situational awareness SSA is absolutely vital. India needs a robust, real-time network to track adversary activities, monitor debris, and keep its own satellites safe.
More telescopes, radars.
Both ground-based systems, yes, but also potentially space-based surveillance, too. And crucially, integrating all that data into a usable threat alert system for everyone who needs it, maybe even regional cooperation on SSA with friendly countries. Good SSA is fundamental national security.
A clear picture of the space environment is essential. What about overall strategy? Does India need a specific space doctrine?
The article argues, yes, absolutely, a formal national space doctrine. It should clearly state India's red lines in space, its deterrence approach, rules of engagement. This would go beyond the existing India Space Policy 2023, adding that specific security layer.
And that helps how?
It provides clarity, it guides capability development, R&D investment, military planning, and it needs to sync up with India's nuclear and cyber doctrines for real cross-domain effectiveness. Analyzing potential elements of such a doctrine is prime UPSC territory.
A clear strategy to guide action. And how does India's booming private space sector fit into this security picture?
Leveraging them is key. Fostering strong civil-military-private integration, maybe creating defense-focused units within ISRO or InSpace to work directly with startups and academia.
Incentivizing them.
Yes. Incentivizing private firms to develop dual-use tech, launch services, maybe with funding or tech transfer under strict security, it could really speed up capability growth in key areas. That public-private partnership angle is important for UPSC economic and tech analysis.
A smart way to tap into private innovation. Now, on the global stage, given the weak regulations, what can India do?
India can take a lead role, actually. Be proactive in shaping global norms, championing responsible behavior like rules for ASAT testing, strong debris mitigation standards, better space traffic management.
So diplomatic leadership.
Exactly. It enhances sustainability for everyone, boosts India's own international standing as a responsible space power, and potentially reduces the need to rely solely on military deterrence. That foreign policy angle is crucial for UPSC.
A responsible leadership role.
Yeah.
Okay, one last area, cybersecurity. If we're relying more on space, securing those systems must be paramount.
Absolutely critical. Serious investment in space cybersecurity is needed, securing ground stations, satellite links, even satellite-to-satellite comms, and exploring things like quantum communications.
Quantum, for unbreakable encryption.
Potentially, yes. Fast-tracking R&D there, Also, building cyber-resilient command systems, maybe using zero-trust architecture, and dedicated joint cyber units with DRDO and ISRO experts for real-time monitoring and response. For UPSC security topics, space cyber is increasingly vital.
Okay, that's a comprehensive set of potential actions. It's really clear, isn't it, that space isn't just out there anymore. It's deeply connected to our security and future.
Undeniably.
So, to quickly sum up this deep dive for all you dedicated UPSC aspirants, the main takeaway is that space is the new frontier of warfare. Increasingly contested, it presents major challenges, yes, but also opportunities for India. Understanding these strategic shifts is, frankly, becoming essential for your exam prep mains, current affairs, and potentially prelims, too.
Exactly. India really needs to be proactive, enhancing capabilities, defining that military doctrine we talked about, investing strategically, and playing a role in global space governance.
Right. And on that note, let's leave you with a final thought to chew on. Given how tightly linked space and terrestrial activities are becoming, how should India strike that balance? Balancing its goals for peaceful space exploration with the unavoidable need to ensure its military security in space.
That's the multi-billion-dollar question, isn't it? It's a complex balancing act that will shape India's strategy for decades.
Absolutely. For all of you who joined us, we really hope this discussion gave you valuable insights for your UPSC journey.
We hope it was useful.
If you found this deep dive helpful, please do give us a like, subscribe for more analyses like this, and definitely drop a comment if you have more questions or thoughts on this critical topic. Remember, all the information discussed today came from that comprehensive article in the Indian Express. Do check it out for more detail. Thanks for tuning in to The Deep Dive.